In this lesson, we'll learn some basic type terminology and what exactly these terms mean. Alright, so I'm working here in Adobe Illustrator for right now, and I have the file 03_begin in front of me if you want to grab that one out of your project files. Now, I want to familiarize you with some type terminology. Now, every day we are absolutely bombarded with information. Information surrounds us, and as viewers of this information, we don't really even have time to absorb what we're seeing. So, in saying this, type oftentimes to us comes in one eye and out the other. We have no choice but to read it, interpret it, and dispose of the type itself. Very rarely do we have time to focus on the forms of the type. Now, the first term I want to discuss with you is the term letter form. Now, a letter form is just simply an individual letter that you're viewing or studying. Now, why do we call that a letter form and not just simply a letter? Well, that actually helps us to remember to actually look at the forms of the letters. Now, in looking at these two letter forms here, you'll notice here that if we look at the capital letter A, there are some very distinct features in the forms of this letter. There are these small, flat feet-looking things at the bottom. We're actually going to learn what these are in the next lesson. I look at this letter form and I also see that one half of it is significantly thicker and stronger than the other half of it, as well as this piece that comes across the center right here. Another distinguishing feature of this particular letter form is it's got sort of a notch taken out of the top portion of it. Now, moving over, checking out this lowercase letter a, if you're familiar with the lowercase letter a, then you know there's a couple of different ways that this could be rendered. There is a method of rendering this where it's just a large circular form with sort of a stem or a foot that comes off the side. This particular method of rendering the lowercase letter a is much more decorative. Notice here that in looking at the forms here, we have some distinct thick and thin features here that this particular letter a has that maybe no other letter a has in exactly the same fashion. If we also look at these thin areas here, there's also what's known as a stress here if we draw an invisible line between the thinnest areas of this letter form. Now, all of these features, or forms if you will, that we've looked at here with these two particular letter forms are exclusive to this typeface. Now, typeface, that's another new term. Let's go ahead and talk about that one for just a moment. Now, let me go ahead and come over to my layers panel. I'm going to hide that letter form layer and bring in my typeface layer here rather. And let's talk about a typeface. Now, typeface, font, what's the difference? Why can't these two terms be used interchangeably? Well, simply put, a typeface refers to the specific design of an alphabet. Now, how does that differ from font? Well, the easiest way that I've heard to explain the difference in typeface and font is a typeface is something you see. A font is something you choose. Okay, now this particular typeface is Adobe Garment Pro. Now, if we come over here to our Characters panel in Illustrator, you'll see here that this very top selection is where we choose our typeface. Now, you can drop this little arrow down, and you can see every typeface that you have installed on your computer. You can see I have quite a few on this particular machine. So, moving down in this dialog, what is this regular field? This field that says regular in it. We're going to talk about that next here. To elaborate on a typeface, or to dig a little bit deeper into a typeface, each typeface can contain type styles. Let me come over here to my layers panel and bring in another layer for you here. Now, on this particular machine, I have 4 different type styles for Adobe Garment Pro installed, and I'm able to use these. I have Adobe Garment Pro Regular, I have Adobe Garment Pro Italic, Adobe Garment Pro Bold, and Adobe Garment Pro Bold Italic. Now, I also happen to know that there are a couple of additional type styles for Adobe Garment Pro that I don't have actually on this machine. I believe there is a semi-bold and a semi-bold italic. Now, that brings up a good point. There are many more type styles that are available in typefaces, oftentimes than what you see in front of us here. We may have things like condensed, oblique, extended. These are all different type styles that you may encounter in different typefaces. Now again, if we come back over here to our character panel, this second drop down box is again where you choose your particular type style. Now let me go ahead and jump out of this panel really quickly here. Now, because I know that Adobe Garamond Pro has an additional two styles that I don't have available to me here. Let's just pretend that I've got them here and we just can't see them. Let's go ahead and talk about what we refer to all of these styles together as a collection. Now, we could refer to this typeface, or we could come over here and we could refer to the entire collection of type styles as a type family. Now, if there is ever an opportunity for you to interchange the term font with one of the terms we've used so far, it would be with a type style. If you're choosing a type style, you might choose the font Adobe Garamond Pro Italic. Now, a few other thoughts on type style. Let me just bounce over here to Photoshop so that we have the Photoshop character panel in front of us here. It's a little bit different than the one in Illustrator in the fact that it has a row of buttons down here at the bottom. Now, let's take a look. What I've got in front of me here is Adobe Garamond Pro and Adobe Garamond Pro Italic. Now, with these buttons here, these buttons are, for the most part, very similar to what you might encounter in Microsoft Word when you have the bold button or the italic button. Let me go ahead and select my typography word here on this second row. Now, if I wanted italics, or an italic version of this particular typeface, I could come over here and I could click this little button right here. And what that's going to do is that's going to use Photoshop, and it's going to actually try and create an italicized version of Adobe Garamond Pro using the software, when really all it's doing is tilting the typography, or tilting the letter forms to one side. Now, if we look down here below, you see here Adobe Garamond Pro Bold. Now, we can do the exact same thing with this type down here. We could actually select this first button right here, and Photoshop will try and create bold type using the type style Adobe Garamond Pro Regular. So, just to let you know, it's always a better option to use a typeface that actually has an italic type style included with it. As you can see here, there is a large difference between Adobe Garamond Pro Italic and the italic that Photoshop creates based on just Adobe Garamond Pro Regular. The type style included with Adobe Garamond Pro for italic is so much prettier and more beautiful than what you get using the software in Photoshop. So just a few notes. Now, there are some other buttons here for all caps, small caps, superscript, subscript, underline, and strike through that you could use as well. Now, when it comes to something like small caps, it's again always better to use a type style that it was created as small caps. Let me go ahead and just hit the small caps button there so you can see what that looks like. So you can see what Photoshop's doing is it's taking an uppercase version of each letter form and squishing it down so that it creates this small caps look here. Alright, now with that said, let's go ahead and bounce back over to Adobe Illustrator here, because there's one other type term you may hear thrown around that I want to let you in on. Let me go ahead and hide some of these layers here. I'm going to go ahead and just come over to my layers panel, we'll hide those, and I want to turn on this type classifications layer. Alright, now a type classification is something that was created by typographers and historians long ago in an attempt to classify different typefaces. So without getting into the specifics of what makes each one of these different typefaces different, what makes each one of these typefaces the classification in which it is, let me just run through these really quickly. We have old style, transitional, modern, slab serif, and sans serif. Now, these first 5 typefaces and these first 5 classifications are pretty much an indication of a passing of time, if you will. The oldest one of these are the old style, then typefaces moved into this transitional phase, then into a modern phase, then we went back to slab serif, and then ended in sans serif. Now, these last 3 are sort of broad classifications that really deal more with modern type. Now, you have typefaces that are more decorative in nature. You have script-based typefaces that obviously try and indicate the handwriting of the human hand. And then you have black letter typefaces that are very, very ornamental, very lush, very extravagant typefaces. Alright, now in looking at these first 5 type classifications. One key element that makes each one of these particular typefaces different is the anatomy of these typefaces. So in the next lesson, we're actually going to pick up where we're leaving off here, and we're going to learn a little bit about the anatomy of type.